What is good, NBA fans? How are you? Welcome into another week of Dropping Dimes. I'm your host, Matt Knost. Hope everybody out there is doing well. Um, so I have a few things on the agenda. Um, I want to start the day. Look, I had a full slate of notes, and then yesterday a little monkey wrench got thrown in there because Shams is reporting that basically there's a fire sale in Pacerland and almost any asset is on the table. Um, so we're going to get to that discussion. I didn't think anybody was going to do this dramatic a move in the season so far, but looks like the Pacers might finally be blowing this up, trading out all their pieces. We'll see. We'll see. But I wanted to start today's discussion with I think arguably the team that I'm most surprised by this year, that I catch myself trying to watch more than I ever anticipated, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers have turned into a team where, depending on who they're playing on that night, they supersede a lot of other teams. I'm shocked. Like it because the makeup of the lineup is so interesting to me. And the fact that they've been resilient, so they lose Colin Sexton for the year. He's out. And then, Evan Mobley went out for 4 games with an injury, but he's back. But they lose Sexton. You're like, oh, wow, okay. Well, he was one of the driving forces of the team, and they should fall off a cliff. And since then, they're 6-8 without him. But in that mix, there's a 1-point loss to the Utah Jazz the other night. That's what sparked this. I was like, that was a good game. They had a excellent shot of winning that game. And they've played tight against a bunch of really good teams. I mean, in that 6-8 stretch, their losses include to the Wizards by 3, to the Celtics by 6, to the Nets by 10. Golden State beat them by 15. But then the Nets again, they only lost by 5. Then Phoenix again, arguably, um, you know, if they're not the best team, then Golden State is the best team, but they only lost by 5. Then they lose by 1 to the Jazz and lose by 8 to the Bucks. But they're in the preponderance of these games. It's not like they're getting just absolutely crushed. And on the flip side of that, in that stretch, they took on the Rockets and beat them by 18. Or pardon me, the Mavericks, rather. And that's the Mavericks at full health. 18. That's a shellacking if the other team is at full health. They beat the Heat, but that's the Heat without Jimmy Butler or Bam, but still beat the Heat by 26 points. That's a damn good win. They've beaten the Celtics in that stretch when they had a loss to them as well, so a little 1-1 action. But they're a really interesting team night in, night out to watch. And their starting 5 right now consists of Jared Allen, Lauri Markkanen, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and Isaac Okoro, which it would be Colin Sexton if he was healthy, and Isaac would be out. But in that, you got Jared Allen, Lauri Markkanen, and Evan Mobley. 3 massive guys. Just huge. The wingspans of those 3 guys alone, it just clogs up passing lanes, and it translates too because their defense is top tier. Now, their offense is something like 19th in the league, but their net rating puts them in the top 10. Their defense is top 5. I believe it's 4th. So with that positive a net rating, it's a testament to how well they're playing collectively as a group, especially on the defensive end. So if you haven't done yourselves a favor, please go watch a little Cleveland Cavaliers basketball, because in no way did I anticipate that Cleveland would be, in the play-in game right now. They're sitting in 8th position, and they're playing, 400 basketball over their last, since Sexton went out, which is going to translate to them falling out of the playoff mix. But the future in Cleveland actually looks really bright. And with all this new speculative trade talk, it's like what possibly could they could be movers and shakers at the trade deadline if they wanted to. They really just need to find somebody who's willing to take Kevin Love off their hands. Uh, it'd be one thing if his 31 million was an expiring deal, but it's 2 years. So if they want to get off of him, they're going to have to assign picks to do it. And floating around who is willing to surrender picks to take on Kevin Love and then give up some sort of asset that Cleveland would be interested in. Um, it's not that deep a list. But that was one of the last teams that I was trying to get into. I opened up the trade machine on ESPN last night once basically all that dropped from Shams, and I just started going through permutations of, okay, well, who's potentially going to be in the mix to make a trade? There's a lot of teams standing pat, but Cleveland could be one. They have an interesting group of guys. They have certain players who are untouchable in Evan Mobley. I would assume Jared Allen, Darius Garland, and Lauri Markkanen, their main starters. And then Okoro, um, he's been getting good running them, and his price is only 6.7 for the next 3 years, 6.7 per, which is an excellent value for the amount of minutes that you're getting him for. So, they're going to be looking to ship out someone along the lines of, Kevin Love, possibly a Rubio, who's their, backup point guard, but he's pretty great for them as a backup point guard, gives them a steadiness. And it's, that was another one confusing where you're looking at this team like, all right, they got Markkanen. They obviously already previously traded for Jared Allen, but then they sign, Rubio in the offseason. It's just like, what exactly is this team? And shows you sometimes that so very little. You got to give it to them. It is a zag when everybody else is kind of looking to go with these interchangeable individuals, and everybody shoots from three and a lot of the same design. They went, you know what? We're just going to have the biggest effing team possible. So Jeremy Bowers asked a question, kind of a dumb question, but why can't the Cavs just release Love to get the money off the books? I'd have to look. So there's the stretch provision where you can basically take a guy off the books and you stretch out the value of his contract over future caps to basically produce the amount of cap that you have and free up a roster spot and potentially reallocate that money, so a partial amount of it somewhere else. But then there are rules within that, like I know at the last one, the last collective bargaining agreement, you couldn't apply it to deals signed during said collective bargaining. So after they signed the new CBA, if you went out and signed somebody immediately and then regretted it a year later, you couldn't use the stretch provision on him. It had to be to those individuals predating that current CBA. And I would imagine Kevin Love falls under that stipulation where his contract was signed under the current collective bargaining agreement. Ergo, you cannot use the stretch provision on him. I believe that would be the case with Kevin Love. And it's the second year on that. 31 is tradable to some degree because there are teams that would like to get off of, 2, 3, and 4-year contracts and have that expiring deal. And if you were willing to attach, a pick or two to it, say a first and a second or something, it depends on where, Love may be going and the situation of the other team. It's entirely doable. It's just the fact that it's 2 years. So you'd be taking over the contract for the remainder of this season, then next season. And given the output of what Kevin Love is doing these days, that 31 million is an exceedingly steep price. I do not see anyone forking over any kind of asset whatsoever for Kevin Love. It's just not going to happen. Um, he's played in 17 of their potential games this season, and he's averaging quite possibly, let's see, is it the worst of his career? Yes, the worst point production of his career. He's also playing the fewest minutes of his career. Hasn't started a single game. It's the worst he's ever shot. Second worst he's ever. Third worst. There it is. My apologies. Third worst he's ever shot from the field as a whole. Although his 3-point shooting is legit, 36%. But when a guy's only playing 20 minutes per game at $31 million, that's a hell of an ask to try and find another team willing to take on. But the Cavs could be. I mean, they have some flexibility with a bunch of these contracts. And if they assign enough assets, they could get off of Kevin Love. I just don't see the impetus to do it because it's not like they're competing for a championship now and might as well hold on to those assets because, Evan Mobley looks like the future. If you go and look up his specific defensive stats, he is up there with your Rudy Goberts of the league in that the field goal percentage of those guys that try and shots within like 6 feet or less of the rim and shots in general on the floor, especially 6 feet and in, it's double digits the number of times that teams try and run, take a shot against him when he's patrolling in the paint, and their field goal percentage versus anyone else and Mobley is not good. I mean, he is a threat, and he'll eventually morph into the type of individual that Gobert is, in that just the presence of him alone is going to stymie some guys from the thought, let alone the action, but the thought of I can drive in and get a bucket right now. Because he is just a presence down there. And, the 4 games he missed after Sexton went out too, they lost those games. But at the same time, that's 2 starters that they're down. I think it's also a testament to how good Mobley is that he's getting this much run as a rookie, and he is just pivotal to everything that they do on defense. And once again, you couple him with Jarrett Allen and Lauri Markkanen, and now you have 3 7-footers out there who give you so much range and size, length, clogging passing lanes, contesting shots, forcing people into basically only outside shots because they're going to run into a forest in the paint. And they all 3 are mobile. So it's not like they're these stationary objects. Now, the long-term longevity of this system, who knows? 5 years from now, centers who are asked to run around this much, usually you need to do like a curtail their minutes over time because they're just not going to be able to hold up, especially if you're going to run 3 of these guys and they're averaging like 34, 35, 36 minutes a game. There's no way long-term that they can maintain this. It's not going to happen. They're not, guards running around there at all times. So you're going to have to either stagger their minutes or reduce it overall and bring in more backups to shore up the position and give them rest on the bench. But for the time being, it's exceedingly interesting. And they're all very young, all 3 of them, but Mobley obviously as a rook. But Markkanen is 23 or 24. Jarrett Allen is roughly around the same age. So those 2 guys are just coming into their prime. And Mobley already looks this good at his age. Think of where he's going to be in 3 years. And as he, better understands, even more so on the defensive front, and then adds tools to his bag. I mean, this rookie class overall is so interesting. There's a bunch of guys that look legitimately good. So do yourselves a favor and go and watch a little Cleveland Cavaliers basketball just for the novelty of 3 7-footers out there and the pain that is for other offenses to try and figure out exactly what kind of shots they're going to be able to best maximize in the hopes of getting a win against this team, because the defense is pretty legit. And they're a fun team to watch, and it's nice to see the excitement and exuberance in Cleveland, um, where they hit on Mobley. I got fed up with Cleveland just because they kept getting the number one stinking overall pick. I mean, 3 times in the past 20 years, but really 3 times over the course of 12 years. What are the odds of that? And it always seemed like the league was somehow bailing them out and giving them more opportunities. Um, and now to see this team really be cobbled together, they made some wise trades, great drafting, and they're building it from the ground up. But I think the best telltale sign of that is Kevin Love last year wanted off this team so badly, and it was painfully obvious to anybody watching the games that he had, a soggy diaper and did not want to be in Cleveland anymore. And now, after big plays and whatnot, you'll see him running off the bench and celebrating with his teammates and building these young guys up. And that, to me, is a testament to the future of this team. They've changed the momentum of the culture, and now it is trending in the right direction. And hopefully they don't do the idiotic thing that they did with LeBron and the Pelicans did with Anthony Davis, and it looks like the Pelicans may do again with Zion Williamson. And they've already kind of, to some degree, done with Zion, though they screwed that team up 6 ways to Sunday. Is forego a lot of assets to bring in veteran talent when you should really be trying to build with other young guys on the same timeline as your core. Because that way, if you get it right, a la the Warriors, now you have a foundation that is only going to grow, mature, and get better together. And then you can just add small pieces around that. But you have the cheaper contracts on the younger guys, and you have their bird rights. You just have certain advantages as opposed to if you ship out all your first round picks and the ability to get more bites at the apple of bringing in these bigger talents at a cheaper price. You're just basically not mortgaging your future for the sake of modest improvement today. And that was the problem previously. It's what Cleveland did wrong about LeBron's first stint. They wasted a ton of their draft capital and flexibility to go out and get just some more veteran pieces that were never going to elevate that team to the true top tier. Now, they did make the finals once, but they had no shot once they got to the finals. So anyway, do yourselves a favor and go watch at least one Cleveland Cavaliers game. I mean, of their upcoming slate, tonight they play the Bulls. And it is at home for Cleveland. I still favor the Bulls. We are playing excellent basketball right now, but it should be a hell of a game. I think the at Timberwolves on Friday will be super interesting because now it's like a clash of styles. And what will Karl Anthony Towns look like? Is he just going to continue to settle for outside shots from the 3-point line, which he's a good 3-point shooter, but at the same time, it really nullifies some of his effectiveness if he's not down there to crash for any kind of boards or provide any kind of spacing if everybody's just going to sit on the outside and be like, hey, Edwards, go ahead and cook and try and get into the lane. And guy's a super athlete, but if you get past 7-footer number 1, you still have 7-footer number 2 and 7-footer number 3. And given the athletic prowess of Mobley and Allen, that's a tall order. I'm not saying Minnesota couldn't win this, but it's a tall order. All right, so there you go. Please do yourselves a favor. Watch a Cavs game. I think they're my most surprising team thus far. Because I figured they were not going to be anywhere sniffing this type of rarefied air. All right, let's move on. So yesterday, Shams reported that the Pacers, it's been in the ether for a couple seasons now. Should they split up Sabonis and Turner? Or, the Celtics wanted to trade Gordon Hayward for Miles Turner, but that trade fell through. Um, and there's been this discussion, can these guys coexist? Does this make sense? When you look at the numbers, in previous seasons, it's when Sabonis is on and Turner is off, the offense goes through the roof, the defense craters. In the inverse of that, when Turner's on the floor, defense goes up dramatically, offense doesn't quite crater, but it's nowhere near. One thing Sabonis is great at is sitting at the elbow and being like a mini Jokic, and just kind of zipping the ball around. He's not as top tier as Jokic, which who is, but a junior version of that. And on the right team, it could be interesting. But you would need a potential championship team to look at those two guys, and also Karis LeVert is out there. They didn't. There was no mention of Malcolm Brogdon, so I guess he's going to be part of their future. And obviously, their rook Duarte. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've watched like 3 of their games, and yet I'm still kind of blanking on that. But I think it's Duarte. I guess that's part of their plans going forward. Karis LeVert always seemed like he was going to be, collateral for potentially a move going forward, and figured they were going to split up the duo of Miles Turner and Sabonis. But if all 3 are on the table, that means all 3 could be off of this team. And then, so who is going for what? Now, as much as Sabonis helps in offense, I think Turner would potentially have more suitors. I know one team that is out has dangled the prospect of going to get him is the Minnesota Timberwolves. So if you're the T-Wolves, to match contracts, you're going to have to ship out Taurean Prince and Josh Okogie. Now, on those 2, they're also expirings. So the Pacers would be getting off of that money. But if they wanted to, they could sign and trade them, or sign them if they like the guys. But those are expiring contracts. So basically, they'd be wiping off that money from Turner if that's what they want to do. But I think you would have to get minimum 1, but potentially 2 first rounders for Miles Turner. If in fact Minnesota does have interest in this, I think one is certainty. You're going to have to give up a first rounder to do this. You might have to do or 1 and a pick swap option, something along those lines. You could also do a Taurean Prince plus Jake Layman. And in that instance, I think Okogie has more value. Layman's, I believe, another expiring. But I think in that instance with Layman, you got to throw on 2 firsts, because Okogie has shown flashes of somebody you might want to re-sign. So he has more value to me overall of a potential piece that you could hold on to. So if I'm the Pacers, I'm like, all right, I want 2 firsts out of the deal. And if I can do that plus 2 expirings, maybe that's not the worst trade in the world. I think the Warriors could make a run at Miles Turner as well. If you did Looney, Wiseman, and Moody, I think there's a possibility that could happen, because you have Miles Turner under 2 years, Looney's an expiring, and then the Pacers get younger with Wiseman and Moody. Plus, then the Warriors could hold on to Kuminga, because I think that's their more valued of the 2 rookies in Kuminga and Moody. The downside is Looney knows what this offense is and plays big minutes for you, and you're losing on the potential of Wiseman and Moody, but it's kind of basically upgrading that position overall. And Miles Turner shoots a decent clip from 3, and he's not going to need to shoot a bunch of them. So he would give you a ton of presence in there. And if I'm The Pacers, do I like the idea of the expiring of Looney, but then Wiseman and Moody as my two young assets coming in? Do we think that they need to assign picks to make that happen as well? I think if you're getting two, lottery picks back in Wiseman and Moody, that might be enough. I don't know. Um, we'll see, but I think I'd like that one better than the 1 to 2 first plus 2 expirings from Minnesota, because you also have Wiseman and Moody under contract, and you would have their rights. Could be interesting. Now, Sabonis is another one that could be out there. Teams are interested. Now, the Warriors could package the same thing again together to go out and get him, Looney, Wiseman, and Moody. But if I'm the Warriors, I say no to that. The contracts line up. That's why it's just the easiest to, switch it around and do this. But their defense, which has been it's number one in the league, would fall off precipitously because Sabonis just doesn't have those defensive chops. Whereas you would still maintain that with Turner, and then with Turner, he doesn't need to shoot as much to render the same value as opposed to Sabonis. Although Sabonis would give them an uptick, especially at the power forward in regards to offense. And, he is a good passer, which is something that system needs. The ball needs to keep moving at all times. I think that's something that Turner could, acclimate to. But I don't know. It makes a lot of sense for Sabonis and the Warriors as a fit. But I think personally, I think you could slip Miles Turner into that Kevon Looney role, and it's dramatic upgrade, and you don't sacrifice any of your defense. I don't know. It's a plug and play to me, whereas Sabonis is just like, okay, well, now we have to reformulate things a little bit. But for Sabonis, what about to the Spurs? So you could do Thad Young, who's an expiring, Lonnie Walker, who's an expiring, Josh Primo. He's an interesting young player under contract for 4 years, and he's 19 years old, plus Trey Jones, and he's 2 years at 1.5. That's just to match contracts on those last. But that would get the Pacers off of almost $19 million of salary. Plus, you'd get a couple of young, interesting guys back. The problem is I don't know what kind of market there is for Sabonis. It's hard to gauge, and it's hard to find teams that are willing to sacrifice assets to go out and get somebody like that. Now, he is an all-star. And he's a good player, but if you look down the list of teams that have the assets to make moves, who is a Sabonis away from doing something really huge? I don't know. Had Denver not made the move to get Aaron Gordon last year? Possibly, but then they brought in Gordon for his defensive ability and the flexibility of them to defensively match up with other teams. So it's like, no, not really. Minnesota wants to go after Turner. In the Spurs range, the Rockets, Thunder, and Pels, I think all those Rockets and Thunder, I don't think ship out any assets unless they're getting more young guys in return. No way they go after somebody like Sabonis. And then above, them in the standings in the West, nobody has any of the assets or the motivation to make it happen. In the East, it's kind of the same thing all over again. If I'm Orlando, Detroit, or Toronto, it's like, nah, I'm good with what I've got. That's no upgrade for me. The Knicks, they want to make moves elsewhere, especially at the guard positions, and primarily point guard. They just switched Alec Burks into the starting lineup, but he's also 30 years old, and potentially they could shake things up and do something differently there. The Hawks have a lot of pieces, and they also have expirings, like saying Cam Reddish. The Hawks could be in the mix. I didn't get to them in the trade machine. I should have. There's only so much time once you're trying to line up all these trades and get things dialed in. But I think Sabonis is a tough market. And the last one is Karis LeVert. that's another one where I'm not sure who the buyers are specifically for Karis LeVert. He's a good player, and the Knicks, if they want to make an upgrade at the guard position, could do it. But if they're going to do that and forego assets, I think they're going to try and land a bigger fish. So, I mean, this is really early on, though. So who knows what precisely, by the time the trade deadline is looming, if nobody's made a move yet, we'll obviously have a clearer picture as to who are the legit teams and who are not. But to trim some of their roster, I could see potentially Atlanta doing something. And after that, I'm not sure. Because if Philly gets into the mix with Simmons, they had their sights set on one team and one team in particular, and that's a trade I've got coming up here in just a minute. The Wizards, the best trade piece they have is Bradley Beal, and they're not trading him until he says, I want to be traded. Miami Heat don't have the flexibility, and plus they're just set in stone as to who they are. Even with Bam going down, and they could use the help, say, at the Miles Turner position, they don't have the assets to give up to get him, to bring him back. The Bucks aren't going to sacrifice anything to make any changes. The Bulls aren't either. And the Nets don't have any flexibility, even though they could use a center. They've taken Blake Griffin out of the starting lineup, step in the right direction because he really looks old this season. They put LaMarcus Aldridge in, but they also, they're dealing with their own injuries and whatnot, but they don't have the flexibility. I looked at them to do something. I should have looked at the Hawks. That one makes the most sense. But everybody else is like, I think they either stand pat or don't want to sacrifice any of the assets to get. So the Pacers could have picked the worst year ever to blow it up. Just, it sucks. But there are other teams out there that are potentials to make a trade. Philly has been eyeing Dame since the discord in Portland has come up. And unless you were doing like a Dame for Simmons almost straight up, I'm not sure, because one team is going to tell the other, I need picks in this as well. And it's probably going to be Philly we're taking on the older player. You're getting a younger one. I think their contract lengths are the same. And they're roughly the same in overall value. Although Dame now is apparently angling for, he wants a 2-year extension tacked on to the end of it. He still has 4 years left on his deal, if memory serves. Here, I can tell you in 2 seconds. And right now, Portland's front office is balking at that. Yeah, so he has 4 years left at $39.3 million. And he wants 2 years tacked on at $102 million to make him the highest paid player once that contract comes to fruition at the end, and he'd be making $55 million. But at his age, at the point he'll be at that time, that's a shitload of money for a guy in his mid to late 30s. $55 million? That is banana times. And you could do it straight up. Here's a 4-teamer that I came up with, and I think a lot of people say no to it. But this is the best I could do. So Philly gets Dame. The Knicks get De'Aaron Fox and probably like a second rounder from Sacramento. Portland gets Ben Simmons and Kevin Knox, who's an expiring, and probably a first from Philly. And then Sacramento gets RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, Luka Samanic, Matisse Thybulle, and Tyrese Maxey. Philly is sacrificing, Simmons, who's not playing for him, whatever, but Thybulle and Tyrese Maxey for Dame. If I'm Sacramento, do I want to take on? First off, I got to make room for the addition of 5 people on my roster, so that's a problem. That's where one of the reasons this trade fails. But is that enough of a return for me? Do I think I want picks in return? This is the best I could do in the trade machine, trying to get all these pieces moved around, because I think Sacramento is another team that potentially could be in the mix. Philly, I think, potentially would be willing to pay this price. I have zero problem with Simmons going out. And I don't see them surrendering a first if they also have to give up Matisse and Tyrese to make this deal, work for all involved. Um, but you could say, well, why do we need to make it a four-teamer if we're really just focusing on Philly and Portland? I don't know, because I was just fucking around and throwing a bunch of teams into the trade machine. Another one for Sacramento, and Sacramento could be, big sellers, is if they still want to give, take another spin on the Buddy Hield to the Lakers. I think they get a dwindling return on this, but if the Lakers acquire Buddy Hield, this is what they have to give up in order to give him. Taylor Horton Tucker and his 3 years at $9.5 million per. Kendrick Nunn at 2 years at 5 per. So Sacramento gets a little bit younger, and giving those guys contracts a little bit more flexible. Austin Reeves at 1.2 for 2 years, and then a bunch of basically throw a dart at the 1-year guys they have. I just wrote down DeAndre Jordan, Wayne Ellington, and Trevor Ariza because they're not getting much run for the Lakers. They could sacrifice them, and they're all expirings. So you get off of, $5 million if you're Sacramento next year. And I also think the Lakers would have to send probably 2 first rounders to make that happen. But they don't have a first rounder that's tradable in either until either 25 or 26. It just comes down to they have so many different picks and pick swaps with the Pelicans. It's whether or not the 24 pick ends up relaying or they do the swap in 23. There's a whole bunch of that's got to be in this area for this if it's going to relay. That's when you start looking at future picks for all kinds of different teams. And you're like, dear God, like go look up. If you want to look up a mind-numbing exercise, just Google Thunder future picks. But if you can go to a site called prosportstransactions.com, and they have a draft pick transactions section. And if you pull up the Thunder, they first off have so many picks coming. Like this year, they have the Clippers pick. They have the Pistons, which is from the Rockets, which is a top 16 protected. And given the state of both of those teams right now, that'll defer to 23 when more than likely there's more protections on that. They have the first round pick from the Suns from the Chris Paul trade. And that's a top 12 protected, but it looks like that one's going to relay. And then they also have another, like basically they have 4 picks in play, potentially 5 in the first round of next year of 22. 23, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in play for 23. For 24, they only have 4. A weak year, guys. Only 4. For 25, there's 7 again in play. And it's all a matter of, okay, if this relays and then this one is higher, we can do a swap here. And the amount of configuration that it would take, the mental gymnastics to figure out exactly where you're at is pretty daunting. But for the Lakers, let's assume everything goes according to plan. Then they can't trade another first until 25 or 26, but probably 26. Because you can't, because of the Stepien rule, you can't trade outright first round draft picks in back-to-back years. It basically just stops a team from destroying itself by chasing players immediately. But if I'm the Lakers, is Buddy Hield worth 2 first? I think you got to do 2 firsts on that. I think if I'm Sacramento, I hold their feet to the fire. Why not? What does it cost you? I think Buddy Hield has a tremendous amount of value for numerous teams. And, given his overall contract, it's not egregious. He's got 3 years left at 22.7. That's a very tradable contract. Now, De'Aaron Fox is at 5 years for $28 million, and I think on some level they might want to just hand the keys to Tyrese Halliburton and get De'Aaron Fox out of there. But the 5 years at $28 million is relatively steep. It's not the worst in the world, but De'Aaron Fox hasn't shown that he's, you know, exactly worth $28 million to anybody else outside of Sacramento. But what do you guys think in the chat? If you're the Lakers, do you do that deal? THT, Kendrick Nunn, Austin Reeves, and then pick your poison on the 3 1-year deals. I chose Jordan, Ellington, and Ariza because you're already sacrificing guard play in THT, Nunn, and Austin Reeves. And if Sacramento doesn't care, then you're just getting those as expirings and then tacking on, I think, minimum 1 first. But if I'm Sacramento, I ask for 2 to get Buddy Hield. It's still in the cards. He's a great shooter. Do you do that deal? You're sacrificing a lot of depth on an already thin team to add something you don't have, which is a younger guy who consistently shoots one. You say, what about Malik Monk? What about Carmelo Anthony? I trust Buddy Hield more than I trust both of those guys at this point. Even though Monk has shown flashes of being a young guy that can do this, and Melo is Melo, I still like Buddy Hield better. I think if I'm the Lakers, I probably say no because you're just sacrificing so much depth. And if you ship out THT, he's the reason you didn't re-sign Caruso. You put all your eggs in the basket of we're shipping out everybody else but THT. You're one of our young pieces going forward. So Tamor Khan put up, so did Matt already talk about the report that Luka wants to play with Ben Simmons? I did not, but I don't see how that makes sense for Luka. Luka operates with the ball in his hands. And what exactly would Philly be taking back? Because you'd have to do Porzingis in that mix. We could look it up really quickly. But it'd have to be Porzingis. And if I'm Philly, I don't want Porzingis back. He's prone to breaking down. He's expensive. You're talking about 3 years at $31 million left, and then Simmons 4 years at $33 million. Unless you're attaching picks to this, I don't see how this happens. I wouldn't touch this if I was Philly. But same time, I think Luka needs to get his ass in shape before he starts talking about who he wants to play with. He still looks chubby, and we're 25 to 26 games. Daniel Savla says, Matt, you know very well the Lakers bench isn't the problem. I realize that, but you're not going to find any takers for Westbrook. No contract is untradeable, but you're not going to find anybody that's willing to sacrifice the amount of money it's going to take to do a salary match. So you need to fill in around the edges. You're stuck with Westbrook, whether or not you like it. So you're going to have to ship out a boatload of dudes to make modest improvements. But your core is LeBron, Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook. There you go. You're stuck. And I don't know if Daniel, if you are a fan of the Lakers, but trust me, I hear enough talk radio around LA, and it's utterly ridiculous. Tamor Khan asked, do you agree with Chuck that the Lakers are going to be in the play-in game? Who knows at this point? Because if this were the West of the previous 20 years, 22, in fact, years, I would say no. I would say, wow, they're going to struggle because right now they're at 13 and 12, a half game above, full game above the play-in game right now. But it's not like it's a dramatic difference because that's the Mavs and Nuggets tied at 11 and 12. The Lakers could very easily, if they just maintain this, they could end up in the 6 because the West it's 3 teams at the top And everybody else is a big fat question mark of, I don't know which team I'm getting tonight, whether that's because of injuries, because of COVID protocols, or because of the way that they were constructed, and doesn't make a lot of sense, a la the Lakers. Um, so it's not inconceivable to me that they could be like the 5th seed, given where the West is right now. I mean, play-in game, Portland is in the 10th position, and they're at 11-14. They make the play-in game at sub 500, whereas 11-14 would get you to the 13th position in the East. Just, it's a testament to how weak the West is for the first time in a long, long time. Did you guys see the reports out of New Orleans that fucking Zion has swelled to 330 pounds? And there was a long, almost telescopic lens picture of him walking off the court. Just like, yeah, he looks big. I mean, that Pelicans, they are an utter mess. There's a team that, unfortunately, I think could be panic trading come deadline time. And I don't know. At some level, it looks like Zion doesn't want to be there. And perhaps the Pelicans as a franchise don't want to either. So if they want to sell and move the team, they need Zion on it. But if Zion doesn't want to be there, then why are you going to mortgage every asset you have? Even though you just got the guy, it might be more advantageous to ship him out already, which is crazy. They have not had the opportunity to build around him because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But perhaps it's also because he doesn't have the motivation to stay healthy because he doesn't want to be in New Orleans. It's this weird, cyclical, disgusting thing. But yeah, between that and like Luka saying, "Oh, we need to play with more intensity and we need to do this, that, and the other," and then you see him and be like, "Yeah, but you came into this season out of shape." It's easy to say we need to do all these things, but if you're not going to be the individual that's putting in the time and effort to be those things, and I realize it's easy to criticize from the sidelines, and by sidelines, nowhere a part of the team whatsoever and just enjoying from afar. I realize it's super easy to criticize, but I don't know. When you come in, I mean, it's tough to do when you're that age playing that much basketball and have that lack of overt musculature. I don't even know, that's really difficult to do. That means you're eating like shit and not getting in the workouts and conditioning that you probably should be as a top tier athlete. Um, but anyway, I had not seen that, Tamor. And he, feel free to, Luca or anyone else to say exactly who you'd like to play with. But I also think, like, if you ask any player, hey, would you like to play with this top tier caliber? Of course, they're going to say yes. Now, they also realize that leads to speculation and whatnot. So perhaps he's trying to get the front office to do something. So Rashawn is coming back and says, finally caught your Knost. I told you about the Nets. They can't beat anybody good. Nets are not beating the Bulls, Bucks, Hawks, or Heat if they get healthy. No way the Nets are coming out of the East. Trust me, Rashawn, I thought about it when my Bulls were playing the Nets. And I was like, well, chalk it up, man. I think he's, he might have something here. We'll see. I agree with a lot of people. I still think, look, right now the Bucks are 9-1 in their last 10, and they still are not at 100% full health because Lopez isn't back, and they're just running roughshod through teams. And Giannis looks like an MVP caliber player all over again. This year's MVP race is really interesting. There's a bunch of guys making the case for it, but I think it's the Bucks. Right now, I don't see anybody beating the Bucks in a best of 7. Which good for the Bucks, man. I'm happy to see that team succeed. I'd love it if it was my Bulls, but the amount of mental hurdles that they had to get over, and the guys like Middleton being a G leaguer and a two-way player, and eventually moving into now he was a key cog in a championship team and a gold medal team. And Giannis is a middle first round draft pick, but building himself up to be one of, if not the best player in the world right now. Drew Holiday getting to a situation where you can best maximize his abilities. It's really interesting, but I don't know that I see anybody beating the Bucks in a best of 7 currently, outside of Golden State and Phoenix. Those are your top 3 teams, in my opinion. I'd say those 3, and then the Bulls at 4. And then possibly 5 is either going to be Utah or Brooklyn. Maybe you give it to Brooklyn just because they're number 1 in the East, but Utah will more than likely round themselves into easily part of the other 2 in the West and separating, and then their own echelon of here are the 3 really legit teams that have a shot at winning a championship, and everybody else is a pretender to the throne. Whereas the Nets, I think you're right, Rashawn, could slip out of that conversation come playoff time. As far as like the Heat, let's see where their health is at, and the Hawks still playing up and down. I do think that they're obviously trending in the right direction, but I still think they're a little up and down. And I need to put them in the trade machine because they have a bunch of, expirings that teams would be interested in, and they might be able to go out and secure one player that's better than the 2 going out as far as their need. But I guess that'll be something for a different day. All right. Well, that is it for today's Dropping Dimes. Thank you to everybody that joined in the chat. Sorry I didn't get to you guys as much as I could have, but there was a decent amount to cover today. So my thanks to Jeremy Bowers, Jordan Anderson, Daniel Savoy, Sean Gardner, Steven Salas, Timothy R. Williams, Tamor Khan, Rashawn Robinson, Professor Rhino, Merrill Wells, and I believe that's everybody. So thank you, everybody. It was awesome to see you in the chat. Tamor Khan said he's going to the Warriors game tonight. Enjoy that. I'm seeing them in February. Can't wait. Clay will be back. And it's been a few years since I've seen the Warriors play, so I'm looking forward to it. That is it for Dropping Dimes tonight, or today, rather. You can follow me anywhere on Twitter and Instagram at Matt Knost. If you're listening to this and you want to watch it or join us in the chat, we do it every week, Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that is youtube.com/Dropping Dimes. So you can join myself in the chat who show up every week. And that is it. I'll see you guys in the very near future next Wednesday with another edition of Dropping Dimes. Until then, adios.